Leading Britain's conversation with Julia Hartley-Brewer. Call 0845 6060 973. Tweet at LBC. Text 84850. Julia Hartley-Brewer on LBC.
Good afternoon to you. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. This is LBC, leading Britain's conversation. With me live in the studio is the leader of Britain's biggest teaching union, the General Secretary of the NUT, Christine Blower. She's here to tell us why teachers are going to go on strike next month, why I suppose that would be good for pupils, and we're just going to take your calls as well. She's here till 3:30. If you want to put a question to Christine, give us a call right now, 0845 6060 973. We will try to get to as many calls as possible after 1:15. I've got an awful lot of questions up till that point, though. Christine, thank you so much for joining us in the studio.
Delighted to be here, Julia.
I know you can only be here till 3:30. You've got grandparenting duties.
I do have that, exactly.
Certainly take priority. I'm with you all the way on that one. Now, first question I'm going to ask you is very wide-ranging. Mm-hmm. Are schools for the benefit of pupils, parents, teachers or politicians?
Well, schools, education is for the benefit of society, so clearly that covers everyone. But actually, of course, schooling is primarily to make sure that we have the broadest ranging education for children and young people that we possibly can. We can't do that without teachers, so we have to have a concern about how education works for teachers too. OK,
now your union is planning to go on strike, a national strike, on the 26th of March. Another union, the NASUWT, were planning to strike with you. They've decided on Friday they would pull out of that. Tell us why you're going ahead with the strike. What do you want to achieve? Well,
of course, we won't necessarily be going ahead with the strike if we are able to succeed in the discussions that we're having with the Secretary of State. We won't need to go on strike. The fact is that we had a meeting with civil servants on the 14th of October last year when we actually thought we were being promised negotiations about a number of issues about which we're in dispute. None of those discussions have so far taken place. So we're now at the point of saying, if we can get into these negotiations, if we can make some progress, serious progress on the things that we've been in dispute about for a long time, the strike doesn't need to happen. We stood down the strike action that we had planned for in November precisely because it looked as though the talks were going to happen. They didn't happen. We didn't actually either take strike action in February because we were hoping that the talks would happen. We're now saying, if the talks happen and we make progress, we don't need to go on strike in March. If no progress is made, then actually we do.
And this is about teachers' working conditions, pay, pensions?
It's about all of those things, yes. But of course, don't forget that teachers' working conditions are also children's learning conditions. And where you've got teachers working extraordinarily long hours, and of course their parents too, they may not be doing their absolute best in the classroom. And in fact, one of the things that our members say is that they haven't got enough time to plan the good quality lessons that they want to do because they're being taken off that by doing other things, other kind of data collection and accountability measures that they have to fulfil. So people do want to be in the classroom doing their very best. Most of my members will be delighted if we don't have to go on strike on March the 26th. I would be pleased if we don't have to. If we do, it's because we've made no progress with Michael Gove.
OK, I know your union and other teaching unions have quite a lot of issues with Michael Gove, the Education Secretary, over particular education reforms, free schools, academies and the like, changes to the school curriculum, obviously changes to conditions. Can I ask you, though, in the past 50 years, can you tell me of any education reforms that any government of any political hue that they have introduced that the NUT or you have actually agreed with? Because it seems to me you oppose everything.
Well, you see, the thing is this, it depends on how you look at it. Andrew Neil asked me this very same question, and in fact I could think of a lot of things where our public position looked and the sort of journalists were suggesting we were opposing everything. Actually, what we were saying is we think there's a different and better way of doing it. But of course, that comes across in a headline as NUT opposes. So let me, for example, give you a reasonably recent thing. The phonics check and teaching reading by systematic synthetic phonics. Now, anybody who is a teacher of reading, and that will be anyone who's worked in an infant school or a reception class, Key Stage 1 class, they will know that phonics are part of what you use to teach reading. But they are not the be-all and end-all. And this government has set its store by the fact that in Clackmannanshire, a very small authority, there was a trial of systematic synthetic phonics, and all of the kids in that trial learned to read. That hasn't been replicated. And what we're saying about that is there are lots of different ways that children learn to read, and therefore the government shouldn't be saying to teachers the way to do this is just to use systematic synthetic phonics.
Studies around the globe historically have shown that actually there are some methods, including i.e. synthetic phonics, which work for the vast majority. Not all, and there's never going to be a system that works for all. There will be children who just learn differently, children with different learning disabilities as well. But there is, nevertheless, this synthetic phonics system it's how you learn to read, it's how I learn to read, it's how children now in schools learn to read, and it does work for the vast majority of children. So would it not be definition of madness to not use that system as your first port of call?
Well, actually, I learned to read much more by picture cueing and look and say.
You learned by cat,
by look at her. Look and say. No, at least as much by look and say, because the fact is that there are lots of words that you learn early on that you can't sound out by systematic synthetic phonics. So, for example, the word coat, you can't sound out coat. I can remember reading coat from Janet and John books, and I did it by look and say. She's putting a coat on. That's a picture of a coat. This is the word coat. I now know the word coat. So I didn't learn it by exclusively by phonics. And of course, there are different approaches to phonics as well. It's not all systematic synthetic phonics. So what I'm saying to you is, yes, of course, people who teach reading use phonics. Of course they do. But it's wrong for the government to say to schools that that's what you have to do, and also to say to those institutions training teachers that this is the only way they should be training teachers to teach reading. It's just not the right approach.
Is it wrong for a democratically elected government, regardless of whether it's a Tory, a coalition, a Labour government, whichever their politics are, is it wrong for them to say, we've been elected, and one of the things we've been elected on is a policy about toughening up educational standards and improving things? Is it wrong for them to say, we think, from experience we've looked at, from whatever we've looked, this is what we want to do, this to improve schools? Is it wrong for them to say that? And is it right for you to say, as someone, as far as I'm aware, I never had a vote. I never had a vote on whether or not you were put in charge of schools. I did have a vote on who was running this government, or the last government, or the one before that. No one voted for you to be in charge of running schools, but they have voted for the government to do so. So why do you think that what you have to say is worth more than what the government has to say, regardless of which political party is in charge?
OK, well, I'll give you a figure from a YouGov survey that we did in January, shall I? This is not an NUT survey. This is a YouGov survey, so independent of the union. And 79% of teachers, and they may not all have been NUT members, but 79% of teachers said that they didn't think that the government had a positive impact on education since the last election. So that's what teachers think, and they are voters.
Is it not the case that roughly 80% of teachers plus vote Labour?
Actually, no, it's not. No.
I thought the last polls I saw that it was a very, very high level of Labour voting, and therefore there might be a party political aspect to that.
I would think that's highly unlikely, and in fact we've got voting intention figures from previous YouGov polls where actually before the previous election, and this was not NUT members again, it was teachers, where actually there were higher numbers of people suggesting that their voting intention was to vote for the Conservative Party than for the Labour Party. Now that has switched around because their lived experiences that actually they don't think that this government is doing the right thing.
So do you think that schools are safe in this government's hands? Because the ATL leader, another teaching union, Mary Bowstead, she sent out a tweet recently saying it's not in the Tories' DNA to acknowledge the enormous efforts of the teaching profession to raise education standards. Do you agree with that?
Well, you see, the thing is, it's our experience that our own members don't feel that this is what's happening. Now, I can't disagree with the fact that Michael Gove does say, anywhere he's afforded a platform to say it, that this is about social mobility and trying to improve things and so on and so on. But our experience and our view is that all of the policies that are being put in place are not actually doing that. And then, of course, you have to look beyond education, because if you're really interested in equity as well as quality, you have to look at what's going on in the rest of society. And finally, I'd say on this, the OECD, Michael Gove often quotes the OECD.
We talked about these figures only yesterday.
Club of rich countries. Now, they do the PISA test, of course, but they do other things as well. And they produced last year a report on exactly quality of education and equity. And one of the things that they concluded was that actually you need a system which is not fragmented. What you need is a system where the schools are all essentially governed and operated on the same kind of basis. Now, they won't be identical. They won't be what a famous non-politician once called bog standard comprehensives, because schools are all different. They have different heads, they have different governors, they have different groups of kids in them. But actually, the systems that are the most equitable and have the highest quality of education are the ones where there are not lots of different types of schools. There are not free schools. There are not academies. There are not all of these other things. There are essentially schools, and the schools take all comers and they come from their local areas.
Aren't those also in countries like, say, Sweden and Finland, countries which are often cited by people like Michael Gove, the Education Secretary, as having great systems where actually the average teacher has a master's rather than, say, a couple of grades E's in A-level, as was allowed to go to teacher training college some years back and may now be teaching our children. It's about the quality of the teachers, isn't it?
Well, actually, Sweden has plateaued very badly precisely because it's got a whole load of free schools. It's had a couple of firms that were running free schools that have gone bankrupt. So its actual results have plateaued and are in fact beginning to go down. Finland, you're quite right. Finland doesn't have inspection. It doesn't have, it has a very different system, but it does trust teachers. That's the point. And in those schools, in those systems where it's just it's a single type of school and teachers are trusted, they do get the best results in the PISA test.
Why should we trust teachers, given that we have so many children who leave primary school unable to reach the required standard? I think it's 1 in 5, I believe, across London, certainly, unable to reach the required standard of literacy and numeracy at secondary level. And we have so many children who leave secondary school without any decent GCSEs in worthwhile grades, unable to find work, unable to find fulfilling lives as a result. Even allowing for the fact that some of these kids will have come from very desperate circumstances at home, and allowing for the fact that schools cannot make up for a failure of parenting and society, even allowing for that, why should we trust teachers when it is quite clear that a huge proportion, a minority, but nevertheless a huge proportion of children in the state system right now are being failed?
Well, you see, I just don't accept the premise that a huge number of children are being failed. I mean, for example,
1 in 5.
London.
1 in 5 is a huge proportion.
Well, the fact is that the required standard does not mean that children can't read and can't count. I mean, the required standard, so-called, has been in a lot of different places. And in the same way that Ofsted grades move around, so you get a school that's outstanding one year and then apparently needs special measures the next year, these things do move. Now, actually, in London, for example, London is now the region that has the best and most successful schools. And how did we do that? We did that by trusting teachers. We did that by having the London Challenge, which did have a little bit of additional money, but not loads. And we did it by teachers doing peer-to-peer work, so that in a secondary school, for example, where they had a particularly good department, they could work with a school where that department might have had a lot of turbulence, a lot of change, and they could actually do CPD, continuing professional development, and they could do all of that peer learning.
Learning from best practice within schools.
Yes, learning from best practice.
Okay.
And that's really good. And that's why you need to trust teachers, because actually they're in there doing the job every day. And most teachers, if you ask them what they do well and what they do not so well, they'll tell you what they do not so well first, because they know that there are things that they need to learn.
And yet, if you're the child, having gone to a comp myself, you're a child who's got a teacher who teaches a crucial subject or is crucial through your primary school years, who isn't up to scratch, what do you do with them? We're going to get to that. Time is against us, unfortunately, Christine. We'll get to an update on the traffic and travel. After that, we're going to talk about what we should do with bad teachers, why, Christine, why you don't like children being tested, and far more besides. If you want to get your calls in, 0845 6060 973. I'll let a few of you on air, I promise. We'll get back with Christine Blair, General Secretary of the NUT, in just a few minutes. Don't forget, this is streaming live online at lbc.co.uk. This is LBC and the time is 3:16.
I'm Jo-Louise Knight in the LBC Travel Centre, and even though it's half-term, it's still looking very busy on the roads. We had problems in Twickenham earlier. I'm afraid they continue. Now, the A316 was shut eastbound from the Hospital Bridge roundabout to the Witton Road roundabout for emergency repairs. It has reopened, but with only one lane, which is causing queues. Heading westbound, it's now shut from the Witton Road roundabout towards the Hospital Bridge roundabout for these repairs. Now, long delays on all surrounding routes, including through Hanworth and Hampton. The South Sector in Eltham still down to 1 lane eastbound due to roadworks between the Yorkshire Grey roundabout and the A2. In Derbyshire, the northbound M1 is looking very slow towards Sheffield at junction 30, where we've got 1 lane blocked because of a broken down vehicle. In Shoreham, in West Sussex, the A283 Old Shoreham Road remains closed at Brighton Road for emergency repairs. And for the trains, South Eastern aren't running from Ashford International to Ramsgate due to flooding. Keeping you moving. Your next travel updates in half an hour.
This is LBC.
Dental implants can be life-changing, as Alistair discovered thanks to Andrew Darwood and Susan Tanner.
I'd always been quite happy with the denture. The deciding factor was the taste of the food. Andrew was able to fit my new bridge in an afternoon. When I got home, I opened my fridge. There was a large packet of radishes, picked the biggest I could see, popped it in my mouth. Bang! Taste explosion.
Ridding yourself of dentures could give you a new outlook on life and a much-needed confidence boost. See darwoodandtanner.co.uk.
I just can't describe my joy and delight.
Darwood and Tanner. New smile, new life.
A house fire can take away a lifetime of memories in 2 minutes. About the time it takes to test all your smoke alarms. Fire kills. You can prevent it.
Oh, come on! We've moved precisely 6 inches in the last quarter of an hour. Every morning it's the same. Same jam, same cars, same... No! Don't let him in. What are you doing? It's your right of way. Why do we do it?
I don't know, but you don't have to.
Huh? Who said that?
With GoToMeeting by Citrix, you can say goodbye to bumper and hello to face-to-face meetings wherever you are. Just download the online meeting software and start saving time and money now. Visit gotomeeting.co.uk for a free 30-day trial.
Do you know what that sound is? That's your new digital marketing department. And that'll be your new web designer. And that's Haibu, where these experts are joined by plenty more, from web designers to search marketing specialists who work hard to get your business noticed online and on mobile. Best of all, Haibu can do it all for you, or give you the tools to do it yourself. To find out more, go to haibu.co.uk. That's hibu.co.uk, or call 0800 777 433. Oh, that'll be your next new customer. Haibu. Made for business.
Last year, the action was non-stop at Silverstone. So how do you make this year even better? Go VIP with a Silverstone hospitality package. Whether it's the 2014 Formula One Santander British Grand Prix or 2014 MotoGP, there's a hospitality package for all budgets. You'll also enjoy fantastic trackside views, guest speakers, and great food and drinks. So whether it's for a client or yourself, book now. Visit silverstone.co.uk.
Leading Britain's conversation. Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
Benefit delays are leaving people without money for food for weeks on end. PM saying people should no longer be expected to receive money for doing no work. Kiev in the Ukraine, at least 25 fatalities, some of them police officers.
I gather that your brother is there as well.
Yeah, my brother, I'm very worried about my brother. I tried to call him a few times and he didn't answer.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC with the Financial Times for in-depth comment and analysis on UK business.
Julia Hartley-Brewer on LBC.
This is LBC, Leading Britain's Conversation, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer, and live in the studio, Christine Blower, the General Secretary of the National Union of Teachers. They're going on strike, possibly, if they don't get the talks they want with the Education Secretary, Michael Gove, next month. Don't forget, this is streaming live online at lbc.co.uk. You're welcome to call in 0845 6060 973. Christine, we said we'd get on to the other issues in terms of things like what we do with bad teachers. You said we need to trust teachers. What should happen to bad teachers? Because you're on record as saying there's no such thing as a good or a bad teacher. I can tell you, I went to a bog standard comp. I had good teachers and I definitely had bad teachers.
Well, there are certainly teachers who can flourish in some schools and not in others. But if we accept that...
No. There are some people who can't teach, full stop. Do you accept that?
I accept that teaching isn't a job for everyone, and that's what I was coming on to, Julia. I absolutely accept that teaching isn't a job for everyone. But the fact is that there are lots of people who leave teaching simply because, having started it, they don't find it's the job for them. I have to say there are also at the moment a lot of very good teachers leaving because they can't, the whole thing is just too pressured. But what we should do with teachers who are experiencing difficulty is we should obviously support them to be the best teachers they could be. It's expensive to train a teacher, at least it should be expensive to train a teacher because they're doing a really important job. But ultimately, if they're not able to do the job that we want them to do, then we have to find a way of making sure that they leave the profession. Now, I haven't ever said anything different from that. What I've said is that there are some teachers who actually do flourish in different kinds of schools. Because some people say to me, all that happens is teachers move around. And in some cases, a teacher might leave a particular school where actually the prevailing ethos or whatever didn't suit them, and they can be very successful. I've got loads of cases like that.
But we also know loads of cases where it's the kids from the bottom of the pile, at the bottom of the social economic ladder, who are in the sink schools where the teachers end up who can't teach.
Well, I'm not sure that that's true. I mean, I don't think it's helpful to have the expression "sink school." The fact is, there are clearly schools.
So we'll all pretend that all schools are equal, are we?
No, what we'll say is that there are some schools where, due to a variety of reasons, they're not doing as well as other schools. But I mentioned earlier, one of the things I'm very keen on is the London Challenge, where you get schools to work together in order to improve things for all kids, but also all the teachers as well. So one of the problems that we've got at the moment is that if you actually fragment schools so that they're all like individual freestanding businesses, or they're in chains where they've got no geographical link, then there isn't any local community of education through which teachers can work together.
But hold on a minute. Aren't the introductions of academies and free schools, to which your union is opposed, those are offering real choice for parents who don't have the option of going private if they don't want to send their child to the local bog standard comprehensive. Now, you've said on record every child should go to a good local school, a non-selective. You're against grammar school education. Yet you were lucky enough to benefit from being taught in the grammar stream of a mixed ability school. Yeah. So you, unlike me, you never had children in your stream who were doing English literature O-level who couldn't read properly, because I did. You didn't have to put up with that. What have you got against selective schools? And what have you got against sending your child to the best school you can? Because your daughter didn't go to the local bog standard comp, did she? She went to a school in a different borough.
Yes,
Why
she
is
did.
it okay for you and not for other people?
Well, listen, I haven't said anything about children have to go to school in their own borough. I've never said that. The fact is,
you said in their own area. I've got you on record saying it.
That's right, and that's because when my daughter went to school, we were just after the ILEA. Now, in the ILEA, all of the boroughs were the same. They were all in inner London.
You did not send your daughter to the local comprehensive. Why not? Was it not good enough for your daughter, but good enough for the other people living in the area?
It was actually the easiest one. The one I sent her to was the easiest one to get to.
The nearest school to you was not the school you sent your daughter to. You sent your daughter to a school that was high achieving, that was in a different borough, was nowhere near the nearest school for your child to get to.
Do you know what the results were when my daughter went to Holland Park School? I mean,
it's a better school than your local comp was.
Well, I have to tell you that if you'd been the division secretary of a union in a particular borough, you might have thought that there was somewhat of a conflict of interest to send your child to a local school. But the fact is that she went to a school to which she could get very easily. Both of my girls went to local state schools, and I think that's really important for them. It was a very different school from how it is now, and Holland Park School was very mixed in terms of its achievement over the period of time that my daughter was there. But it was a school that didn't have uniform, because she had said from when she was 9 years old she wanted to go to a mixed school with no costume, and that's where she went.
OK, let's talk to Andrew now. He's in Docklands. Andrew, what do you want to say?
Yes, I was just struck by the opening comment of your guest there, because she said that the school, you asked her if it was for the benefit of the children, and she said that no, it's for the benefit of society. Now, I don't know where that comes from. That just sounds to me like then you can impose any ridiculous policy on schools and give the children the worst possible education and still say, well, there's some benefit there. Surely if it's only exclusively for the benefit of the children, they get a fantastic education, they will then produce loads more wealth for everybody else to enjoy that benefit society. It's just turned upside down by, I don't know what this sort of thinking is, this sort of collectivized thinking that we can all children are the same. They're not just automatons, that just go to school and learn one way. I learned a different way. I didn't get a single O-level. And yet I run businesses since I was 20 years old, and I think now I'm pretty pretty literate and fairly, good at speaking.
Andrew, let's let Christine respond to that then. This is a collectivised thinking, and it means that it's not for the benefit of the children.
Well, this is a clear example of what was in my head when I said those words were clearly not what you heard. And what can I say? I'm sorry about that.
You only said the words I heard,
But the fact is that education.
Yeah, two of us heard.
The reason for having education in society is for the greater good of society ultimately. But of course,
no, it's for the individual.
No, of course it's for the individual, but that's what society is. It's made up of individuals. Julia asked me at the beginning was...
And then you will get it, but what you're saying is it's for the benefit of the bureaucracy.
No, I didn't say bureaucracy at all.
That's what's behind it. That's why it's more expensive to actually tutor a child in the state sector than it is in a quality private school.
OK, Andrew, I'm going to leave it there. I want to get another caller. John is in Danbury in Essex. John, what do you want to ask?
Afternoon, ladies. I've had a few skirmishes with schools and that. Yep. But one that's come to mind at the moment is when we take the kids out of school for holiday, we get fined £120 per child. Now, if they decide to go on strike, do I send them an invoice for the days that I have off, or my wife has off, to look after these children for how long the strike goes ahead?
Well, I think what you should do is write to Michael Gove and say if he gets engaged in some serious discussions with us, we won't actually have to go on strike at all. I should say to you, I don't particularly favour fining parents for going on holiday not in term time. I do think there is a big wealth of responsibility on the holiday companies who make it very much harder for parents to go on holiday other than in term time.
Of course, you, Christine, you'll be quite easy to afford any term time holidays or holiday time holidays. I've got to ask you this because it does perplex me. You are a self-declared socialist, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yes. But you earn £159,000 a year, is that right?
No,
you
that's
don't.
Completely wrong.
What do you earn?
I think my current salary is about 103, and
there are quite a lot more than the average teacher gets.
It is more than a lot of teachers, but it's not a lot more than a lot of head teachers.
But you're not a head teacher, and you're not a teacher. Why should you get £103,000 plus other benefits? You have a very big. You took a huge pay rise a few years ago. You've got a well above inflation and what your members were getting. You have a huge pension contribution. Is it 16%? Far more than anyone in the private sector. Indeed, most in the public sector.
But why should you get that money? NUT. It's not just me. That's what the NUT pension scheme is.
So you're just a victim of it, really, more than any.
No,
I'm an innocent victim of a generous pension scheme.
But it's not. I wouldn't like you to think it was just a pension scheme for me. That's what the NUT pension scheme is.
How can you, as a socialist, wanting equality, wanting social justice and everyone to be equal and equal outcomes, how can you justify you earning so much more than someone who is teaching children in a classroom, which I'm sure most of us would argue was a more worthwhile job than anything you do or indeed I do?
Well, you might think it's more worthwhile than what you do. I think that teaching is a very important job. And when I finish being General Secretary of the National Union of Teachers, I fully expect to go and teach in other jurisdictions. But I can tell you that the salary for the National Union of Teachers for the General Secretary of the National Union of Teachers is not out of kilter with General Secretary salaries elsewhere, and it's certainly not out of kilter with head teacher salaries. And I run a much bigger organisation than most head teachers.
One final question before we go to the news. Why don't you like children being tested? Is it because it will expose what teachers are not achieving or not doing right?
No, we don't like them being tested on phonics early because we frankly think that's too young to fail. And a lot of children will fail the test. Even quite good readers will fail the test because they'll make sense. Is it not a good
thing for teachers to find out what children can and can't do when
Absolutely,
and
they do that all the time in lessons, day after day. They don't need to do additional tests to do that. But the fact is that we are a massively over-tested country. And as you know, UNICEF found that we have some of the least happy children in the world. And they made a connection between over-testing, pressure at school and happiness.
And yet in Wales, which has been run by Labour for the last goodness knows how many years and has no testing at all, has seen the standards in their classrooms go down dramatically. They have no tests whatsoever.
Well, they haven't seen standards go down dramatically.
They have different figures
They have had a look at the PISA tests, and they didn't do as well as England on the PISA tests. But actually, we don't put that down to the lack of testing at 11. We put that down to the fact that the tests are different from the kinds of things that are being taught in our schools in Wales.
You know, maths, English, science.
Different.
No one needs those anymore.
Entirely different types of maths. And the fact is that they're not. PISA tests are voluntary, so we're not testing all of the children. So we're extrapolating from quite small numbers, and that's true whoever's figures you're looking at, whichever country.
Christine, it's been an absolute pleasure. We didn't come to blows. I'm delighted by that, at least. Christine Blower, she's the General Secretary of the National Union of Teachers. I hope you'll come back and join us again in the future. Take more calls, 0845 6060 973, if you want to have a say on what Christine had to say. Unfortunately, she has to leave us, but I would be very pleased to get your calls on that. Coming up, though, it's LBC News Time, and it's 3:32. And here with the latest news headlines, it's Simon Conway.
The phone hacking trial has been told how Tony Blair offered to act as an unofficial advisor to Rebecca Brooks at the height of the crisis at the News of the World. The Old Bailey's been shown an email the paper's former editor sent to James Murdoch in 2011. Miss Brooks and 6 others deny all the charges against them. The EU has threatened sanctions against Ukraine following violence in the capital Kiev, in which at least 25 people have died.